So, and I know they're going to say, now then from 55 and up, and I'll say from 80 to 103. So, God bless all of you. Now, I want to, by the grace of God, get out of the present tense time and bring this message to an end. I've dealt so much on the evil of the day, I realize the time factor to it is it's getting away. But I close by reading this morning here what the millennium in itself is going to help to produce. It tells us in Isaiah, the 2nd chapter, how that your plowshares will be beat into pruning hooks and so forth. But turn with me tonight into the 11th chapter of Isaiah, the beginning of the millennium. And I want us to take a look at the millennium, because keep in mind, I had a reason for reading Haggai this morning out of the 2nd chapter. Then Hebrews, the 13th chapter, yet once more signifies the removing of those things that can be shaken, and those things that are made, that those things that cannot be shaken, things that God ordained to be permanent fixtures, to be the means of how mankind lives and governs himself on this earth. Brothers and sisters, there's no doubt within my mind, in the next following months, we're going to see a lot of disturbances begin to take place, not only in the Middle East, but right within our own sphere of government and domestic relationships we see going on here in America. We have put together a mixture of a society that, brothers and sisters, if it was to left stand for another 50 years, it is doomed to destroy itself. Common sense tells me you cannot take 10 cultures and force it to blend together. You create a disaster. Because, brothers and sisters, somewhere within that, there's certain ideologies that would devour and be the means for the destruction of the other. And God only knows what would come out of such an era. Our professors and philosophers of today, oh, but the Constitution, yes. Yes, what about our Constitution? I'm sick of these modern interpreters of it trying to tell me what it meant. Let's go back to the founders who wrote it. Any stupid man that didn't know a thing about the Constitution 200 years ago, you bring a modern along, and he looks at it and try to tell you that the freedom of religion means it can be freedom for every religion. That's not so. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, there was no Paiute Indian looking over their shoulders when they wrote that charter and him whispering, remember me in that. There was no Apache saying, remember me in that. You know that. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, there was no Islamic guy in America when it was wrote. This has come along later. Now that we've got our Buddhist temples, our Hindu shrines, with our Islamic mosques going up all over our metropolitan areas. Yes, the nation of a variety of religions, and heading for hell just as sure as you're born. Yes, the statesmen, if they would hear me say that, they would say, that man's gone crazy. I would have to say, you are the misters that's bringing this nation to disaster. Friday night, they had a little clip. How the German people are remembering the Berlin airlift. 1948 and 49 and through there. When our planes flew 24 hours around the clock to bring in behind the Iron Curtain part of Berlin that had been closed up by the Russians. And it told how one of our military men, he had taken these little candies, chocolate candies, and he'd fix little parachutes. And as a gesture of his appreciation for the German children that has spent months and months and months without the taste of a delicacy, over a certain area of the city, he would dump these out for the parachute and showed the German children running down the street to pick up a little piece. Our all-wise president has went over there more or less to commemorate. I heard my brother say this morning in his speech, he was glorifying that wonderful woman that had made those candies in that little parachute. And he was speaking so wisely how this wonderful woman that had done that ought to be praised. And said, would that person please stand up? And that man stood up. Oh, Clinton, your day's coming. God will allow you a few mistakes, but your day is coming. And the day is coming, brothers and sisters, when this whole world's going to reel and rock when God starts speaking. When he begins to give out his speeches and tell the world to get ready for something better. Now, brothers and sisters, just as sure as we're sitting here, we're sitting here now in an era of time of evil. If we was to look at all the evil, brothers and sisters, a lot of people could run themselves crazy. But from the standpoint of God's Word, it's not that we make it that way, it's the devil has made it that way through man's own disobedience to not reverence and respect what the Scriptures declare to be. And now we have this hope. This is why, brothers and sisters, I have to say, from here on, there's going to be shakings, disturbances of various descriptions. And the man of this world is going to wonder. He's going to ask the questions. Speeches are going to be made. Wonder, why does it have to be like this? Here we're working so hard. We're spending so much money. We're getting A's here and there, and yet everything's going backwards. It's supposed to. That proves, brothers and sisters, God's going to shake everything. If it can be moved, then praise God. Get it out of the way. But that which can't be moved, it means God's going to move everything aside. Because he's preparing the bedrock of a kingdom. That the bride of Jesus Christ can be given authority. Don't forget, in the darkest hour of the dark ages, to the Thyatira church, the word of the Lord spoke to every true believer. To him that ever cometh, will I give power in the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. That's the hope of those that lived in such a dark hour. What about those brothers and sisters that lived in that hour of light? To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne. That's your and my promise. So with that in mind, let's picture Jesus. He's brought his bride back to this earth. He's taken over the reins. He's poured out his wrath and destruction. And as the Bible says, and the dead body shall lie from one end of the earth to the other. And neither shall they be buried, neither shall they be lamented over, but they shall become as dung over the face of this earth. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, for a few months this earth is going to be a stinking place after Jesus comes back. That's why it says right here in Isaiah 65, how the righteous will go forth and look upon the carcasses of those that were the sinners. The reason for that is, why will the righteous look upon them? Because they're not buried. They're going to lay around until finally the fowls and the beasts devour. Can't you just see the bones of the wicked being dragged from place to place? Chewed on by the coyotes, the wolves, hungry dogs. Yes, the bones and the carcasses of human beings that walked the streets, that walked the farmland, that didn't want a thing to do with God. God's got a day when he cleans the slate to start it all over. Now I'm reading from Isaiah 11. You and I have a a portion to play in this. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch. What is a branch? It's a little twig, a new shoot that comes out of an ordinary tree. A branch shall grow out of his roots, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. Now I want you to think tonight, brothers and sisters, as we read this promise and prophecy. Try to visualize in your mind as this era of the millennium starts. This planet has went through one of the most catastrophic upheavals that could possibly ever happen. The flood would be a credit to this. Think of the fires that's going to be burning. For it said, by fire and by blood and sword will he plead with all flesh. But finally, it all settles down. He's taken over the reins. Here's the quality of this man. That's the branch. But you and I have been married to him. I want to be part of his wife. It's going to be worth it all just to be his child. Yes, the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, so will it on the bride. The Spirit of wisdom, so will it on the bride. And understanding, so will it on the bride. The Spirit of counsel and might, so will it be on the bride. The Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, so shall it be on the bride. And shall make him of quick understanding. Whatever you visualize as being in Jesus, that's exactly what will be in the bride. Because the very fact that he comes to take his rightful throne, which is the seat of David in Jerusalem, and as it says in Isaiah, what we read this morning, and the law shall go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem in those days. And all nations shall be taught the word of God. So as we continue on here, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes. No crooked politician is in this judgment. He shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither the reprove with the hearing of his ears, a bunch of tattletales. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity, equality, for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. This is national discipline. All nations will listen to him, what he has to say. And with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Let's watch the animal kingdom. Just think. Man envisions how it would be like to live here on this earth with animals of various sizes, different temperaments, personalities. It's wonderful once in a while when you see how these animal trainers are able to get a hold of a young cub lion or a bear. And for a while in their young life, they're taught, they're trained to be very gentle, playful. You see these trainers, once in a while, where they'll even stick their head inside the great big mouth of a lion. Knowing, brothers and sisters, that the counterpart over there in the jungles that's never known the touch of man's hands would devour him in nothing flat. Wonder what's going to happen to this animal kingdom. What changes their nature all of a sudden? It's because Jesus is here. He's the man that come to redeem this planet from the curse and take it back away from the reign of the devil and his system. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. Think of that. In the great countries where sheep are grazed and bread for the thousands. I think of Australia. large sheep herds. I don't know what the devouring prey animals would be down there. But in our western portion of the United States, in states like Utah, Nevada, and through there, the wolf has always been the creature that preys upon the sheep herds. And the sheep herders have tried their best to eliminate this type of a prey. But now in our miserable government, in order to bring things back into equality, they want to restore the gray wolf in the areas where he used to be. And they say what this does for nature. Well, I grant you, brothers and sisters, there may be some common sense in it. But the point is this. I point my finger like this to say, you wise men, who has devised this type of a picture of things? What are you advocating? You're saying that so much of this earth has to be given over to the wild animal kingdom? Then you're limiting the space then that you are going to allocate for the advancement of the human race. Which is more important? Here we've got a drastic paradox. Let me go out there where they've turned these gray wolves loose. And brothers and sisters, I see one of them things snooping around the backside of my house in my dog pan. And I shoot that pup. Somebody tells the environmentalist, they come and arrest me. They'll treat me like I have broken every law in the nation. I killed one of these sacred animals that they have protected and brought to turn loose in man's territory. I'm put in jail. I have been stripped of all my material assets. But yet, brothers and sisters, there's doctors by the hundreds performing abortions, killing unborn babies by the millions. There's a devil loose in the house. Won't you say so? It's a paradox. Evil triumphs. Good becomes evil. But they won't then. And I want to be glad, brothers and sisters, to be a part of that. The wolf shall also dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. Think of it. The young little goat. That little character that's bouncing around over all the plates and the rafters and everything of the building. You can't put nothing away. He's in there after it. I'll never forget. My uncle used to have, years ago, he had 2 lime trucks. And he got his kids a little pet goat, one of these little Nubian fellows. Well, as long as it was small, he wasn't too much of a problem. But my uncle used to park these 2 trucks right up close to the roof of his front porch. And after a while, that goat got to growing. He got big enough. He'd get up on the running board, then he'd get up here, and now he's on the hood of the truck. Then he's on the hood of the cab. Now he's on the front porch roof. And then from there he's on the comb of the house. Back. You can hear him for 5 miles. You can throw rocks at him, he don't know which way to go. My uncle took a shotgun. That eliminated the poor fellow. But the point of it is, brothers and sisters, the wolf and the kid will lie down together. What a happy time that's going to be. Nothing shall hurt nor destroy at all my holy mountain. And the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child. Think of it. A little child. I thought about that little tots running around there yesterday in the crowd. Yes, a little child playing with the animal kingdom. A little child shall lead them. I realize it's hard for us to fathom a big-grown, full-grown lion or a leopard or an animal of that size. But I want you to know, in that beautiful age of the millennium reign, when the dirty devil is chained down for 1,000 years in the pit of hell, nothing is allowed to rule and reign but righteousness. And the knowledge of the Lord is that which is advocated and proclaimed. From whatever this planet, I don't care, brothers and sisters, if there is regions in New Guinea beyond the last mountain range, there is going to be the Word of God taught to those natives. And they're going to come out of their darkness of cannibalism, of spearing one another, and they're going to be forced to sit down and listen to some people tell them something about God. That's what the millennium is for. And the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox. What? God's going to touch that old stomach of his that now lives on a meat diet. Now that old boy is going to have to start eating grass. Lion, your humiliating day is coming. Right now, brothers and sisters, see, his teeth is not shaped to chew grass. How many understand what I'm talking about? That's why, brothers and sisters, when you look at the teeth of a cow, you look at the teeth of a horse or a goat, the tops of them are flat because they were made to live from the vegetation. But all your animals that live off of animal prey, their teeth are sharp. Only back in here do they have gel teeth to crush a bone. But this tells me, brothers and sisters, that a lion ain't going to have to take his front teeth and strip a blade of grass off. He's going to be able to bite it off. God's going to change his stomach. He's going to eat straw like the bullocks. I don't know whether that means that God's going to give him a ruminant stomach or not, and he'll chew his cud, but if he does, I'd rather see him chewing his cud than him chewing on the leg of a young lamb. Wouldn't you? Sure. All right. And listen to this. And the suckling child. Oh, this sounds so fantastic to these modernists today. That sounds ridiculous. I believe in evolution. Yes, and you've evolved too far. You've done jumped over the cliff. And the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp. This is some kind of a little animal. I've never even looked it up. I'm not even that much interested whether he looks more like a weasel, a muskrat, or what. But a little suckling child shall go out there and play around what these little animals are. And the weaned shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, meaning kingdom, which is the millennium coming up. For the earth. Here's the results of Isaiah 2 that we read this morning just as we close. For the earth, I love it, shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. My brothers and sisters, let me say this tonight. Last Sunday morning when I started this message, I started telling a story that actually happened in Harrison County. I brought it to a certain point. I was reminded I didn't finish it. But I want to say this. If the white man, and I hope to goodness, people, you all understand what I am talking about. I'm talking about the creatures that brought the Christian knowledge of salvation through the Lord Jesus Christ here. if this new world had never had the footprints of that Christian man step on it, you would have had a continent here of Native Americans, and they would still be as ignorant today as they were 200 years ago. They live their life after the traditions that they've drug around like a rag doll for hundreds of years. Brothers and sisters, some of them traditions was nothing but a bunch of junk devised by the devil to lead them and keep them people in darkness. This great continent, as it had its many tribes of Indians, they prayed to the great eternal spirit, but they had witch doctors, brothers and sisters, that was full of the devil. And they could put together their concoctions of herbs and stuff and go into a trance and see all kinds of figures looking right at them with fiery eyes. And they could prophesy things. And brothers and sisters, and some of the things they prophesied was right out of the pit of hell. Don't tell me we needed this kind of religion here, because you've got a bunch of white creatures today that's no better off. Let this planet, brothers and sisters, go under this leadership of this modern man, and the day will come. The only God you will be allowed to believe in is the God of mysticism, the universal God of the heathen, and you interpret him to your own ideas. That's what God hates. Why do you think God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt? Why do you think he said to those, now I'm going to take you to a land that flows with milk and honey, but don't you do after the deeds of these, and these, and these, and these. I give you that land. And in that ancient time there was one element called the Amorites. God told Abraham in a vision how his seed would sojourn so many years in a strange land, and that was Egypt. Afterward, he would bring them out of there. He would bring them back into this land. Because God says, the sins of the Amorites are not, the cup of the Amorites are not yet full. And I have to say tonight, when these strange, pale-faced looking creatures began to walk the shorelines, I'm not talking about the adventure seeker, nor the trapper. I'm talking about the man that brought Jesus Christ here, and who couldn't make friends with the Indians. Not them trappers, not them adventure seekers. They cared less whether they lived or died. You were dealing with the same kind of people, in a general sense, that the children of Israel were when they had to deal with the Amorites and the Hittites. You were dealing with the people that had their culture, their God. And as far as they're concerned, leave us alone. Let us have our culture. When I watched that movie here, it's been about 2 years ago when they showed on the 500th birthday. It was commemorating, the 500th birthday year. And it showed 2 or 3 different Indian writers as they would write, and bringing their revisionist ideas. So we didn't need the God of the white man. We already had our God. You didn't have a God. You had only lived under mercy. If you had God, then some of the things that the Indians had been guilty of doing, that was actually what was some of the things they had been guilty of doing. In the great country of Arizona, there was a small tribe. I forget what the particular tribe was, but it was a known fact that every so many years it was their duty to take a young virgin maiden. It was part of their culture and take that young Indian girl high on a mountain and sacrifice her to their God. The world don't like to hear things like this. But once I read it, I can't forget it. And when that white woman at that Indian tribe here in southern Indiana, they had captured her and kidnapped and took her away from her husband. And she was made to be a squaw wife to one of the big shots in this tribe. And she became impregnated by him, and she gave birth to a little baby boy. And she had to go to the river that day when some kind of a celebration where they test all the little Indian boys to find out where they grow up to be wonderful braves and warriors for what? To be able to kill. They make little grass and sticks, a little reef, like a raft, just like Moses was put on, and put him afloat. When she saw her little boy that she had bore, even though its daddy was an Indian, she had a respect for it. But she could not lift her voice against this Indian tribe. And she saw that little reef go floating off. Yes, it went to crime. She was not allowed to scream and run after it. They let it go. Any other little Indian male child, they let it go too. We don't want crybabies in this tribe. That's why I have to say, brothers and sisters, you don't want to live like that. You don't want to die like that. There's thousands dead. I would to God they'd write the true history of some of the things they did and lived and died by. But they don't want to. Brothers and sisters, from New Guinea, from the backward regions of this world, culture after culture after culture has devised and put together an environment of social behavior and conduct it ain't even fit to talk about. Jesus Christ is the only name given among men whereby we can be saved. And he's the only creature that can take the old out and put something new in. And I'm thankful, brothers and sisters, he did something in my heart. He gave me a desire to know his truth and want to declare it. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, if I was making speeches on television, probably most of it would be shut off by now. Because I wouldn't have sense enough to keep my mouth shut. I'm just foolish enough. If I see it, and if I know it to be a fact, praise God, let the world hear it. Can I reveal to you in secret, preach it upon the hour? Stop, he says. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, there is a blessed hour coming, and the saints of God are going to rule and reign. They're going to come back here on this world, brothers and sisters. They're not coming back snaggletooth, bow-legged, knock-kneed, or pigeon-toed. They're coming back perfect. Mentally, spiritually, and physically. Because they're going to be saints. They're going to be little gods. Because they're married to Jesus, the God-man. And he has invested in us an authority that we've just been reading about that's in him. That's why it says in Revelation chapter 20 and verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down through there. And I saw thrones, plural. Damn thrones is not in Jerusalem. There's only one over there. That's the one that Jesus will sit on. But it means this, brothers and sisters, that these thrones are going to be positions where the bride will sit in the nations and the races out of which God chose them and redeemed them. And they're going to take their positions, brothers and sisters, and with equality, equity, with knowledge, with discernment, they're going to judge the meek, the poor, the wicked. And that's why, brothers and sisters, The unlearned of the world today, that's ignorant of what you and I know, he's going to be given a chance then, not for salvation, but he's going to be given a chance to be educated, disciplined, and brought into a new era, so that this planet Earth can begin to enjoy the feeling of what it is when righteousness, equality can rule from one sphere to the other. That's why he has made us into our gods, kings and priests, and we shall rule and reign on the earth. And for 1,000 years, the kingdom that it tells about is going to be the kingdom that God gives to you and I to rule and reign. Now then, yet they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, means kingdom. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Go with me quite quickly. Into Isaiah 65, because this is where our text was at. When we read this in Isaiah 65, we've got to be able to catch a dual picture. Man is progressing from his past, which shows the evil side, shows the side of sin, the ill effects of sin. But man is progressing only as he fits himself, submits himself into the plan of redemption. He's progressing forward to an era of righteousness, equality, when righteousness shall prevail. The end effect is, it's God's way of eventually creating a new heaven, means a new spirit world, where devils ain't running rampant. A spirit world that's clear and clean, that radiates around this planet Earth. And a new earth that's not filled with sin, vice, devilism, but a planet that's populated by nothing but righteous inhabitants. What a day that's going to be. Let's read here. For behold, I create. Now, create does not mean a new act of creating another planet. It's creating a new planet in this sense. He changes it by a process of mercy and grace to something that's worth something. It meets God's standards and conditions. New heavens and a new earth. And the former. Now that takes you into the eternal age, which is Revelations 21 and 22. Shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. It plainly tells us that, two brothers and sisters. It tells us that in that day there will be no more dying, no more crying, for the former things are passed away. That's a promise to the human soul that's been changed. So if these things that has plagued the natural man, his soul, his psychological makeup, and God's going to do away with all of that, then so is the planet Earth going to be moved and brought through a same process. So as we continue on here, but be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create, for behold, I create Jerusalem. When he says this, this is where Jerusalem shall be the capital, the center of the earth, as far as the kingdom that rules and dominates this planet. It's the headquarters. It's the center. It's the heartthrob of the earth. I create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem. All of this is how he looks in the millennium. To a final, finished state. And joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. There shall be no more thence. Now here's how we have to look at this. Now then, you're standing in the millennium. You're seeing now, as God has invested in you, the things that we must do to establish in the millennium the beginning process of regeneration, recleansing, renewing. That's what the millennium is going to be for. You talk about this planet, brothers and sisters. Let me say this tonight. You ain't seen environmentalists yet till you see the bride of Jesus Christ. Amen. They're the ones that's going to have sense enough to know what needs to be and what don't need to be. There won't be politicians walking around with great big sheets of paper of authority. They're going to have instilled in them a revelation and an understanding what God wants, where He wants it, and how He wants it. Politics is out of the picture. What a day that's going to be. What a kingdom that's going to be. No wonder the animals will be easy to get along with. I just think sometimes, brothers and sisters, waking up some beautiful morning and the sun dawning on the eastern sky, in the millennium age, there ain't a jailhouse in sight. There ain't a police officer anymore. You can't even hear the sound of sirens. You don't even know what it sounds like. Hospitals, no. Nothing but happiness, bliss. Nothing screaming out of fear. Everything's singing. Everything's chirping. Everything has got the sound of harmony. What a day that's going to be. The world will rejoice and bloom and blossom when nothing but righteousness rules. I think of the Psalms as the psalmist wrote that psalm. I've seen the wicked in his day, spreading himself like a green bay tree. But then it comes back with a question. But watch him in his latter state. He was not. For the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Isn't that going to be a wonderful day? It doesn't matter, brothers and sisters, if it's that poor native down there in New Guinea, over beyond the last mountain range, that's never even heard. But yet when the bride of Christ begins to penetrate that rainforest, begins to take the knowledge, brothers and sisters, of what this is all about for that hour, when knowledge of the Lord shall cover the earth, what do you think that native is going to act like? You think he's going to run and get his spear? Because he ain't got a devil anymore standing by him, agitating his nature. He stripped of all of that. Now he is a prey to nothing but the bride of Christ. They're going to see the bride of Christ with an open arms invitation. And I cannot help but see these half-naked natives sitting and listening with their mouth dropped open when the immortal bride of Christ begins to penetrate their regions to tell them the good news that this planet Earth is no longer under the control of the devil. Let me paraphrase this. We come here to haul you all out of here. We're going to send you off to a big college somewhere. We're going to give you an education in science, in trigonometry. They need that, brothers and sisters, like I need 3 ears. I'm not saying this to be smart, but I'm saying this. Common sense will still rule out in the end. A lot of common sense with a little bit of reasonable knowledge that we can be taught that puts together a true picture of reality. It's going to make this planet Earth begin to sing and rejoice. Out of the forest, dripping with water, comes a poor, backward native. When he begins to hear that years and years ago there was a man died for him, but he didn't know it. But now he knows it. Yes, the Spirit of God would come upon him and he can see visions of that very one looking from across right at him. Keep in mind, the Holy Spirit, brothers and sisters, is not going to be bound in that hour. It's going to be present. to carry out the full program of what the millennium is to produce. Let me finish this up here. Yes, as we look from the millennium, what has been found, what has been accomplished, to the end effect, we look into the eternal age. There shall be no more events. From then on, an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. Because the millennium is going to be a time factor wherein longevity is restored to the mortal peoples that are reproduced. In the age of what Jesus referred to in Matthew, the age of regeneration, repopulation, rejuvenating. That's why, brothers and sisters, the bride will rule with a rod of iron. It goes to show that in the mortal flesh of man's reproductive organs still reigns that inherited nature. Yes, there could be a beautiful little baby born in the millennium, but them old inherited roots of some kind of an evil, disobedience. But brothers and sisters, no, he's not going to take pneumonia one day and die at 6 months of age. No, he's going to live to have a birthday. He's 1 year old. He's 20 years old. He's 40 years old. Yes, there's still in him something that's very stubborn, and he refuses to learn and obey. Finally, when he reaches that 100 years, that's it. He's disciplined by God taking his life. That's the millennium. It goes to show, brothers and sisters, but as you cross over then the great divide from that, you are in that eternal age. Let me say this. In the eternal age, as the bride of Christ, and the nations that are preserved pass into that age, there'll be no such thing, brothers and sisters, as the righteous thing going out and looking upon the ashes of the wicked. Not in the eternal age. How many understand? Because the great white throne judgment and the resurrection of the sea, death and hell give up the dead, all of that, that clears the planet Earth of all the traces of 7,000 years of sin, death, and evil. And whosoever's name was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Body and soul. Won't that be wonderful? No carcasses to look at. A beautiful planet. All right? For the child shall die 100 years old for disobedience, stubbornness, rebellion. It's a nature. Now then, it tells us here, and they shall build houses. Where's that, Brother Jackson? That brings you still back in the millennium. And they shall build houses and inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. Brothers and sisters, when I have read in the past few months some of this New World Order dogma, when I think of the men that died in World War II, that died on the beaches of these islands of the Pacific to fight for a nation of freedom, that gradually behind the scenes, politicians was designing our world of a new era, when they had no intention for the young child, the boy or girl of the tomorrow, being allowed to live and think and make a choice like I or you. I have to say, take them leaders and hang them. They're worthy of it. They betray you. They want you to fight their wars. Brother Jackson, how can you say that? Apostle Paul plainly tells me in Romans the 1st chapter, they who do such things, and we've got one up there now, he's done the whole 9 yards that's written in the book. They who do such things are worthy. You finish it up. That goes to show me, brothers and sisters, don't you ever think the Apostle Paul was some weak-kneed kitten with sore eyes that couldn't look reality in the face and call black black and white white. And that's what we've got today. All right. Go with me. Let me finish this Isaiah up here. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people, and mine elect shall long enjoy the work of their hands. Man was made, brothers and sisters. God put muscles in his body to be able to do something of it. I'm not saying to go out here and make a body look like Hercules. But there's something about a normal, we will say, mental stable man. He's made to do something and put something together. Exercise this. I'd hate to think we were something other on robot wheels come sliding down a pathway because some electrical current somewhere was motivating us to go do this or do that. I like to be able to make a choice. They shall not hurt nor they shall not labor in vain nor bring forth for trouble. For they are the seed of and the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. And here is the animal kingdom again. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. What a blessed day that's going to be. Let's go to Amos 9. Amos 9 gives us, in the 11th and 12th verse, the same passage of Scripture that James used in the book of Acts. When the question came up, what about these Gentiles that Peter and them had went to? And these Gentiles had heard what Peter had to say, and they wound up receiving the Holy Spirit by speaking in other languages just like the Jews did in the upper room on the day of Pentecost. And here is where James took the setting. Because here in this setting there's a twofold picture we must understand. There's the part in it, yes, that was applicable to the picture back then. But the finalizing of the total thing is for the day and hour just in front of us. So I'm going to read it all, brothers and sisters. I'm going to read the part of it that's applicable for our day and time. In that day will arise up the tabernacle of David. That's rebuilding the temple. It's becoming the heartthrob of a lot of Christian people and the Jewish people. When's the temple going to be built? The politicians care less. The politicians not interested. You've got even Jews politicians they don't even care. This is why God has to shake things in His way. To open eyes, to unstop ears. Yes, that sacred temple that Solomon built, the first one. The Jews out of exiles built the second one, just a small little building. King Herod, he was going to try to please the Jews of his hour, so he politically put out a great big plea for taxation, and he built a monastery. And that's why Jesus says, tear it down, and I will raise it up in 3 days. That was not his house. He knew that. But here's the one that's his. Yes, will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins. Yes, old Jerusalem will be restored to a beauty. What a beauty it's going to be restored to. And I will build it as in the days of old, for it's the heartthrob of the nations of the Middle East, that they may possess the remnant of Edom. This goes to show In order to be able to build that temple, they have got to reach out there and conquer that Edomite area, because that brings that Arab Islamic spirit under control to the Jewish people. Yes, that they may possess the remnant of Edom, and of all the heathen which are called by my name, and that's you and me, brothers and sisters. That's the part that James used. We have been called out to bear the name of Jesus, to be a part of that bride of Christ in the periods of time that God has been dealing with the Gentile people. Saith the Lord that doth this. Now then, following this then is the millennium, and let's read it. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper. My, what a day that's going to be. Brother Allen, when you said this morning what you did about the army tanks, I can see them stripping that old gun turret over there. I can see them putting plows together and taking out across the large acreage of field, brothers and sisters, with an old tank. And brother, talk about tilling the earth. Oh, but you can't do that. You didn't buy that from a dealer. Yeah. A dealer, so what? I have to say this. The mortal people that's left of the nations in that day that God uses to help start beautifying this planet, He's going to take what He can get His hands on and put it to good use. Because they're not trying to start out and see who can make a killing and get rich awful quick. All right. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper. Now, when I read this, try to imagine. If that's a fact, that means that temperament, climatic-wise, we're being slowly returned to a growing season where that at least there's 2 crops a year. How many understand? It's got to be that way. If the one instrument overtakes the other one, while it's in its harvesting state. And the treader of him of grapes that soweth the seed. And the mountains shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall melt. And I will bring again the captivity. Now he goes back into the past to bring it up to that hour of my people Israel. And they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of the land which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. Brothers and sisters, there's other passages of scriptures that I could read, that I could show you more of what the millennium is like. But now, go with me to Revelations 22. In this 21st chapter of Revelations, John is seeing, as he looks at this era of time that's going to last 1,000 years, he sees the end objective in the finished state while looking at it from this side. That's the way we've got to read this chapter. That's why I want to take you this route. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. What does that mean? Does that mean that's how it looked at the beginning of the millennium? No. It's how at the beginning of the millennium there's the beauty of what we are now set in motion to start working for. Because it takes the 1,000 years for it to be completely materialized. And takes us to this. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. great voice out of heaven, saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Now, I want to get to this part right here. Let's go to the 9th verse. Here is how we see this new eternal city. And I'll never forget when I was a little boy, every time I would read this, yes, I could envision a huge monastery of a city made of material stones, yes, some gold, all kinds of material items. And the biggest percentage of Christendom today reads it just like that. But this beloved city has not 1 ounce of earthly gold in it. We printed an article a few years back on this, and one sister from down in Tennessee, she called me by phone. She said, Brother Jackson, you tore up my streets of gold. I said, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. I said, Sister, you go back and read them scriptures. Them streets are clear as glass. I've saw a little bit of gold in life. I've never seen any of it that's clear. The higher it gets, the more the glitter shines. But it's like a long ways from being clear. But you read the whole dimension and the makeup of this city. Streets of gold, gates of pearl. You're looking at something you can see through. It goes to show, brothers and sisters, when from the millennium, the earth has truly reached its state of being renovated, regenerated, reclimatized. By the time this earth goes through that, by the time we get to that eternal day, here's where John saw no more sea. No huge oceans. No huge bodies of water. Sure, there's going to be lakes and streams and such like everywhere. But you see a planet that's been brought back to its original restored state. I have to say, brothers and sisters, before the flood hit. Something happened in that period of time when the flood went on, brothers and sisters, that changed the whole astronomical makeup of this universe as part of that which is related to this earth. This is why, brothers and sisters, when we look at this eternal city coming down, let's look at it and let's see if we can't get a true picture. What are we watching? What are we really looking at? And there came unto me one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. Now notice that. I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. Well, I thought he had a wife back here in the millennium. Didn't he? Sure he did. When did she become his wife? When she was raptured from this earth and taken to glory for that short span of time. His wife came back with him riding white horses. She was with him, she accompanied him as he smote this earth with wrath, with judgment, with desolation, and with all kinds of catastrophic effects. His wife was with him. She was invested much with the same power and authority that had been delegated to him to her. Now then, so she's here with him, and she's given positions on thrones. That's Revelations 20 and 4. And that's her position. He has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall rule and reign on the earth. She's not called a city. She's called his wife. But she's been anointed. So the millennium is over. The earth has reached its finalized state of being purified, regenerated, And we will say restored to its original astronomical relationship to the Creator that put us here. So now then, we're ready to enter into the eternal era. A period of time when there will never be another cycle. Change it. It's eternity. Worlds without end. Ages come and go. Won't that be wonderful? Watch. So he says, come here now, I'll show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. Now, you Methodists, don't get sore at me. These Methodists, they preached, I'm going to die and go to heaven. The Bible says when we die, we're going to go to heaven. They preached that, and they hammered that, and they beat that. They say the earth is going to be burned. That's what 2 Peter 3:10 says. Now, you can't tell me we're coming back here. You see, brothers and sisters, they don't know the language of the Bible. Yes, the same earth that perished in the water and out of the water is the same earth today that's been preserved for fire. But out of that fire is going to come a planet, renovated, regenerated. Ain't that going to be wonderful? That's God's cycle. It's His ways of doing things. And heaven's going to come to earth. That's why I say, Methodist theology, it's got no place. You can't park that stuff around here. Yes. Here came that beautiful city of God descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Now, are we looking at blocks, stones, hewed out? What are we actually looking at? Her light was like unto a stone, most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gate 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east, you read it now. I want to get on down through here. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lieth foursquare. Now here comes not modern math, but spiritual arithmetic. The reason it is given and measured in these figures, it goes to tell you that as time has brought you and I to the era of time wherein this city comes into the picture, this is what Eden was as a place of trees. Here it is, because it's just a little bit of heaven. Let me repeat that. What Eden was a little bit of heaven placed over a geographical spot of the earth. The Garden of Eden did not have a wrought iron fence around it. You understand me? You couldn't find that fence if you had to today. You couldn't even find where the gate was at, because it was all spiritual. And that's why I have to say, when that city was seen coming down, it's none other than a beautiful anointing of God Himself. The way He brings heaven, the spirit world, into our relationship through this anointing. And what Adam and Eve walked through looked like a beautiful, yes, a garden spot. Now you have come to a beautiful city, but it's just how God portrays it in the spirit realm. Because, brothers and sisters, as we go ahead and read here, inside the city there is no temple building, because the Lord Himself is it. And if you look at it right, brothers and sisters, from the garden that looked like it was a garden of vegetation, through the years you have been brought to a city, because it characterizes a finished work. All all these four square figures, brothers and sisters, here it is in arithmetic. Can you add to anything that's four square? Now, you're school teachers. Can you add to anything that's four square? You can't. As you add to either one side, it's no longer four square. You can have a triangle, you can have a quadrangle, you can have a rectangle, but something that's perfectly square. It's this way, and it's this way. Either way you look at it, it goes to show God's picture of redemption is complete. All of it is finished in this figure. Now, let's take that. What is the final verses in the book of Revelation? He that adds two, what did God say? I will add to him the plagues and the things that's written in this book. He that taketh away means you've got to take away something from the measurement throughout the other portions of the Word of God that finalize and is finished here in the finished Word. This is why in the book of Colossians it speaks of it like this in this manner. It speaks how? In the breadth and the width and the depth and the height. It's figurative language that shows in God's plan of redemption, he's got a final picture where he's bringing every human being through to that final state. And I will say this tonight, brothers and sisters. When the bride of Christ, yes, which lives in immortal bodies then, and she moves into that glorious anointing, you read the rest of it. Inside that city is pictured the throne of God and the Lamb sitting on it. Some of these Godhead people, they still want to make Jesus God sitting there. That's where brothers and sisters have to say, he's your elder brother, and that's all he'll ever be to you. Because you cannot override Paul's revelation in 1 Corinthians 15. He tells you there that Jesus will be given power and authority to bring all enemies under his footstool. That's what the millennium is for. God through him is doing that to the earth, for the earth. So that then, brothers and sisters, in the ending of the millennium, he's done that. Then Jesus himself, he forfeits this kingdom. What a wonderful hour it's going to be when the bride of Christ can stand with her husband after the millennium is over and the finished work is done. And brothers and sisters, and we will look up into the realm of the glory of the great eternal Spirit, and we'll hear the Son say, Father, receive this kingdom back into thyself, that you might fill this kingdom, fill this earth with your glory, your presence, like you did at the beginning. Jesus will be our elder brother. Because the reason, so brothers and sisters, he was one elder brother that did not take the inheritance for himself. He shared every bit of it with his other brothers and sisters. Ain't that going to be a wonderful hour? So brothers, the Bible is written, yes, with so many mystical illustrations, symbolic, but don't never think that this city is so many thousands feet running in space. As brothers and sisters, then you have to look like the city like this. You've got a layer of streets down here, then you got a layer of streets up here, then you got a layer of streets up here, you got a layer of streets up here, and you just keep going with layers of streets. There's no such a thing as a spiritual city laid out like that. So that's why you have to take these measurements, and you see the dimensions and the hugeness of it, and you begin to realize it takes these figures to give you and I a large enough picture to look at. When you're through looking at it, you've searched every verse of Scripture, you're trying to find a wrinkle somewhere in your revelation, but you finalize, you can't add to it, and you can't take it away. You are looking at a complete redeemed picture of an earth, a family of people, and a kingdom that God can condescend and come down and empty himself into it. And now, creation, his people, is his dwelling place. It's his habitation. And that's why from then on, brothers and sisters, and the people of the nations that are saved in that day, what does it say? Shall bring their glory and honor unto the city. They will pay their respects to God through the bride of Jesus Christ, because they are the ruling factor of people. I will say that and explain it in this manner. In the angelic family of God, you have three areas of angelic beings. Seraphims, seraphims, and angelic beings that look much like man. Some of them have wings. Now, I know I've heard some people say, well, I don't believe angels have wings. Well, why was the ark pictured? And why was there two golden angels made with wings? And they were arched on their tip, like that, over the Ark of the Covenant. There's three angelic being types within the family of angelic beings. I'm not taking time to explain it. You just have to look at it that way. And when this thing's all over, you've got three types of people within the redeemed earthly family of human beings. You've got your Old Testament saints, they're all immortal. You've got your New Testament saints, that's your bride of Jesus Christ, because they're represented out of every nation under heaven. And that's why God redeemed us out of all nations, so that in return, then as the age of regeneration begins, Christ, through this bride, will rule and show the nations of the earth. And here is a redeemed element of human beings that's redeemed, preserved, and saved for the purpose of repopulating the planet. They make up the nations that Christ and his bride will rule over. And they still will make up the nations of them that are saved, as the earth goes off into the eternal age. Three kinds of people, but they're all now in an eternal state. But each group is not above the other. How many understand? When you read about angels, do you ever read about angelic beings crawling over one another? I hope to goodness that we've got better sense of that. Every time you see something about angelic being, you can see something moving in perfection, in harmony with the Creator that made it. That's the purpose of it. It knows what it's doing. It knows why it's doing. And it knows where its limitations are. So brothers and sisters, there's a lot more can be said. But I'm saying this, that beautiful city is the glory of God come down, and it's how God likens it, places it, distributes it, because it is your eternal secure. And it's the anointing that has been placed upon you and over you to fulfill your blessed role in the worlds without end. I ain't even got a vocabulary to describe the beauty of it. I know one thing. We're going to want to sing and sing and sing. And I'd like to hear somebody sing a good song right about now. Amen. All right. Now don't go away and say, you tore up my beautiful street. I did not. I just showed you how you were to get in and walk on them. Because it talks about your faith being purified as pure gold. But when God gets through your faith, you ain't going to have an ounce of gold in your bank at all. You salvation that's worth a million worlds, though, I'll say that. I mean, understand. A lot of people think every time you mention gold, oh, glory to God, that's like some old dude, man went out there with a donkey and a shovel and you dug it up. Well, brothers and sisters, knowing that the trying of your faith is like pure gold. That's why. But out, we will say, out of the depths of your being, these trials, they have a tendency to melt away all the fleshly reasonings. And it lifts that substance of faith that in the end results, it reflects back to God. A glow that radiates God's finished purpose in your life and my life. Yes, it's likened to pure gold. But yet in reality, there ain't 1 ounce of earthly gold to it at all. Amen. So may God bless you.
On the battle